Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about 3 esoteric books that are really quite interesting. And the first one is written by Dion who's quite well known in the esoteric world. And this is a classic and important book by Dion, and it is called Sane Occultism and Practical Occultism in Daily Life. So this book is actually 2 books in one. It's not a very thick book, but the information is really quite worthwhile. Dion wrote a number of books about esoteric life and magic. And this is quite an important book because it's like a common sense guideline to different esoteric topics and also the practical side about having an esoteric or occult path. And this book is still available, it's still in print, so it's relatively easy to get. But it's an important book because it covers a lot of topics that are quite good to know from a practical point of view. And I like the way it is divided into the 2 books, so that's why there are 2 titles. And the first half of the book, which is called Sane Occultism, it's really written to talk about topics that are important when different issues are encountered on the esoteric path. And Dion was someone who did live an esoteric life, and she was a magician because she had joined one of the later temples or branches of the Golden Dawn, years after the original Golden Dawn. So it covers a lot of topics that are still relevant today, all kinds of topics including astrology and divination, and she always gives a common sense approach and commentary on these topics. So this is quite an important book, and it's really worthwhile having. And I think it's worth having because it's by a very competent author and someone who actually did live this life, someone who knew what it was like to encounter potential entities or dangers. And it's really called Sane Occultism, I think, to put the emphasis on balance and grounding, and to make sure that people are not delving into esoteric areas without being mindful and balanced, which is important. That is a very important starting place. And the second part of the book, Practical Occultism in Daily Life, it's really talking about all the different issues about living that type of life on an esoteric path. So it's a really worthwhile book, and as I was saying, it is still available, and I think most of the books by Dion are worth having. So I wanted to talk about this one today and show this one today for people who are interested. I'll just give you an example. at the beginning of part 1, which is Sane Occultism, she will define what is occultism and is occultism worthwhile. I mean, that's just the starting point. And then she goes into deeper issues of occultism. And then she even mentions past lives. So there's all kinds of things. Group karma, because she was involved with an occult society. So this will just give you an idea. There's also some writing on the left-hand path, and there's even a topic here called mental trespassing. So this is just an example of the types of things that she does put in here. She does mention karma as well. So this book is worth getting if you are interested. The next book is really a classic. It can be a little bit hard to get, but it is still available in this version that I'm going to show, in this edition that I'm showing today. It's called The Zelator, and the subtitle is The Secret Journals of Mark Hedsel, and it is edited with an introduction by David Ovason. And above the main title, where it says The Zelator, it says Magician, Magus, or Initiate? ? This book is an absolute classic. It's quite thick. It's about 600 pages. It has about 100 pages of notes in here at the back, but the notes are really worthwhile and important. This is such an interesting book. This was published in the late 90s, around 1998. And David Ovason is quite a respected esoteric author in his own right. But this book is about an initiate that he knew called Mark Hedsel. And these are the secret journals of Mark Hedsel. And Mark Hedsel was a member, or had been a member of an esoteric society, but he left journals because he was a friend of David Ovason, who edited this book. And a few years after this was published, there was a bit of a rumour going around about whether or not this was just a novel, whether David Ovason had actually just written a novel, a very clever novel, about someone who had been a member of an esoteric society. But from what I have read of this book, and from the many hundreds of esoteric books that I have read over 25 years, I am fairly sure that this is not a novel. This is definitely an account of someone who has been on an esoteric path for many years, and someone who actually had been an initiate and actually knew a lot. Someone who had a lot of esoteric knowledge. I do think this is an actual account of the journals of Mark Hedsel. The picture on the cover is an alchemical drawing of Mercury, or Mercurius. So this book is just fascinating. It's a type of book that, if this was one of the few esoteric books that you own, this could possibly be one of the few that you would need. the notes on their own are very important. So this is a very important book from an esoteric point of view. And it's called the Zelator because that is one of the beginning grades, the lowest grade in some esoteric orders. The Golden Dawn had a Zelator grade, but they sort of called that their first grade. But then they had another grade that was even below that, and that was called the Neophyte. So the Neophyte is like 0 grade, and the Zelator is grade 1. And the really interesting thing that I like about this book as well is that Mark Hedsel actually followed his own path, even though he had been an initiate of an esoteric society. He followed his own path, and he called it the way of the fool. And he did connect that with the 22 cards of the tarot, of the major arcana cards. So that in itself makes this book very interesting. And on my channel I have got a playlist about the 22 major arcana cards, and for each of the cards I have made a video from a spiritual or esoteric approach of the symbolism for people who would like to have a look at that. And I think in a lot of ways I have been very influenced by this book. I had another version of this book. There is a larger format of this book, but it doesn't seem to be available anymore. I'm showing this one because this is the one that is still available. And as I go back to this book and look at this book again, I realise how much this very much influenced and informed not only my esoteric views, but my approach to tarot. My approach to tarot is mainly an esoteric and or spiritual approach. And I really do think a lot of that has been influenced by this book. When I first started looking into esoteric subjects, and particularly the tarot, I already had very much a kind of spiritual regard for tarot anyway. But when I read this book, I realised that the 22 major arcana cards of the tarot can actually be a spiritual path in itself. So this is quite an important book. I think it is an important book in the esoteric genre anyway. But it's an important book for me personally, but I think this is one of the most important books around in the esoteric genre. So this is the Zelator, edited by David Ovason. The Secret Journals of Mark Hedsel, and I will put the details below the video. But it is quite a thick book, but it's really worth getting for people who are interested. The next book is about Osman Spare, and this is a biography, and the subtitle is The Occult Life of London's Legendary Artist. And this is by Phil Baker, and it has a foreword by Alan Moore. This is a very interesting book. Osman Spare was an English artist, a very alternative, avant-garde person. And this book is about the occult life of Osman Spare. There are other books that would focus more on his art, but this is about his occult life. He did know Aleister Crowley. I think Aleister Crowley was interested in initiating him, but Osman Spare was always such an individualist that he actually formulated his own type of magic. He had his own ideas, and he did combine those with his art. So he was known for line drawings, the type of picture here that's on the cover. He also was known for portraits, but he was the type of artist, he had a really wide range of talent. So for example, there aren't many colour plates or art plates pictures in here because this is about his occult life. But just to give you an example of this picture, this is an actual pastel drawing. I mean, that is pretty incredible. It doesn't even look like it's been done with pastels. That's some of his later work, which is quite amazing. But the thing about Osman Spare was that this is such an interesting book because it's all about how he formulated his ideas, why his thinking was so different. This is actually the second edition of the book. And this is actually a self-portrait on the cover of himself. He was the kind of person, he was way ahead of his time. He was the kind of person who did not like any structure. He was a very bohemian figure in the true sense of the word. And this book is really worth getting because it is so interesting and very well written. There are not many books written about Osman Spare. In some ways, that's a bit puzzling, but I think that's because he was also a very private person, almost reclusive. So I think some of the research involved for writing this book, I think it may have been a bit difficult to obtain because of the type of person that he was. But for people who are interested in finding out more about who Osman Spare was, and for people who would like to know more about the way that he thought and his own unique individual approach to magic and esoteric thought and esoteric life, this book is really worthwhile having. So this is Osman Spare by Phil Baker, and it's a relatively new book, so it's quite easy to get. The second edition was published in 2014. So this is quite a worthwhile book, as are all 3 of these books, and I'll put the details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.